you describe where you're from, someone who isn't Irish probably would only see like the neat grid from above and the cleanness of the way I would like to be able to ask you about Ireland. But for someone who doesn't know any single thing, give me a little sense of like the different, I guess just like how complicated belonging is where you're from.
Well, I mean, the complication of belonging shows up in many different ways in many different places. So I don't know that we're unique in having those complications, but maybe the way that it shows up is unique. So Ireland, a small island country in Western Europe, with a beautiful old language. It's one of the 3 Gaelic languages, which is a further subset of the Celtic languages. Yeah, we are near neighbours to Britain, and so for the last 800 years, there's been the presence of British power in Ireland. And so there's been this tussle back and forth regarding the question of sovereignty. And in the last 100 years, Ireland was partitioned into these 2 jurisdictions, the Republic of Ireland, which is an independent European Union republic now, and then Northern Ireland, which is considered to be part of the United Kingdom. I mean, I'm an Irish nationalist in the sense of that I hope for reunification someday, but I hope for that in a way that is safe for all. There was a long-standing war and paramilitary violence and terrorism and all kinds of policies and prejudices that occurred regarding, in this new jurisdiction that was created in the north, about British power and Irish power, and that got reduced to the manifestation of Catholics and Protestants, which has very, very little to do with what people believe about Mary or purgatory or the Eucharist or any of those things. Really, it was speaking about whether you think that this new jurisdiction of Northern Ireland was and should remain British, or was and should be reunited with Ireland, with the Republic of Ireland politically. And so that has caused enormous amounts of skirmish and paramilitary violence, and the presence of British troops and people saying, well, you're a terrorist, well, no, you're an occupying force, we're freedom fighters, all of the things that you find manifested in so many post-colonial places.
Yeah.
And within the context of that, there's an enormous question as to, in a small population where there was a lot of murder and then there was an enormous amount of bereavement and injury, how is it that we find a way to share a small space where mostly everybody knows somebody that knows somebody else? And therefore we're intrinsically linked. There isn't a lot of space to be able to spread out. Some British families have been there for 300 years and they'll still say they're British. They wouldn't say, oh no, we're Irish in Ireland. They might say, no, we're British in Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom. And so you've got multiple forms of belonging happening in the same place. And one of the things about belonging, I think, especially in a place where there's been so much grief, is that you're trying to look for a way in which you can find belonging in the shared experience of saying we have multiple belongings here, and jurisdiction, names and affiliations may or may not change according to democratic votes, but what we hope is that we don't have a return to abject violence and murder and the grief that comes from that, and bereavement and injury. And that, I think, that kind of resolution, we've had a peace agreement since 1998. I think that it's fragile and it's growing, and peace agreements take a long time to work into, but that, I think, too, provides a sense of belonging.
Yeah. Wow. This has been your whole lifetime then. I mean,
yeah.
I'm guessing you're 40, late 40s?
I'm 49, yeah.
So,
born in 75.
I mean, watching this, participating in what it means to experience togetherness probably has been your whole...
Yeah. I grew up in Cork on the very south coast, so in some ways that felt very far away from what was happening in the north. There was never any question of bombs happening in our city, so in that way I was very far from that. But being an Irish speaker and in Ireland where the question of English was there, I never felt far away from the relationship of Irishness to Britishness. I moved to Belfast then when I was in my late 20s. Been doing cross-border experiences from 11 onwards. I'd been fascinated and curious and troubled and all of those things by what was happening at home.
And cross-border is between Ireland and Northern Ireland?
Well, between the Republic of Ireland and the North, yes. It's interesting, isn't it? Like, I remember once being asked in an interview, an interview for being admitted to a student program as a teenager, what have your cross-cultural experiences been? And I said, I know a lot of people from Belfast and a lot of Protestants from Belfast. And I could see that the people who were interviewing me who weren't from Ireland thought that was funny, to think, oh, how parochial. And on the one hand, I was embarrassed. But on the other hand, I thought, actually, the ways within which that shows up are significantly different. And it's not only that difference, it's that it's difference about difference, in the sense of that, as far as I'm concerned, some of these people who were friends who I loved thought, we don't live in Ireland, we live in the United Kingdom. And I thought, actually, I think you live in Ireland. It's just across the border.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just difference about them, it was also difference about where the hell are we?
Yeah.
And what do we call it? And who are the goodies and who are the baddies? And that's a confronting cultural difference.
Yes.
I still stand by what might have seemed like a naive response to a question, that it was a huge deal for somebody of my age to have a whole bunch of Protestant friends from Belfast, and that enriched my life and changed my life and deepened a curiosity about what does it mean to have strong political opinions while being in relationship with people who represent a different strong political opinion.
Oh my gosh, there's such a lesson there for us now who are, I mean, some people don't feel new to feeling divided from their neighbor, and other people, this is probably a terrible introduction.
Sure.
For people who are new to practicing crossing divides, maybe there were divides that were there before and they were just now aware of them.
Yeah.
What are some of the, I don't know, part of me wants to be like, give me a pep talk. Can we become better? Or can we change for the better in light of the fact that we now feel so fragile and divided?
In the United States, I mean, I have some ideas, but I suppose I always think, and it's important to know that, like, I'm from a different country, and what worked for us is not a template for anywhere else, you know. And so each community has its own deep, powerful wisdoms and survivals and practices. And I think in every American household, people are already practicing the kind of human relationships that will better our human relationships, you know. There's the convenience of one side against another, but then you're in your friendship circle, or you're with your cousins and your uncles and aunties and parents at Thanksgiving, and you're already, even within what might seem to look like a group of similarity, you're already demonstrating great subtlety for knowing how to listen, knowing how to reframe, knowing how to push back a bit, knowing how to inquire,
knowing when to stand in the bathroom alone.
You know how to stand in knowing how to avoid too, you know, and sometimes avoid because you think, oh, it's just a bad time, or this is going to be fruitless, or this is going to upset them, and actually they've just been through bereavement or something. You know, that so many of us already have these very, very useful tools for trying to figure out how to hold something together. And sometimes it's a way of thinking, well, what would that look like in a public field? And it's a matter of going, what do you already do? And how can you think about expanding the field of generosity within which you do that? And not just believing the spin. I like to think that, like, peace isn't a way of kind of going, we all agree the same and we all think the same. Peace is a capacity to have serious, serious disagreement and even argument without recourse to threat and violence. And that's what I work for in many years as a conflict mediator. And I begin also to address some of the dynamics of power. There's a rare conflict, if ever, where 50% of power is with one group and 50% of power is with the other. Typically, you'll have 90% of the power with one group who will deny that they have 90% of the power. And you've got 10% of the power with another group who are aware that fundamentally they have to deal with the other group's certain experiences of fear that may not be justified by actual threat. And so you're dealing, therefore, with how is it that you deal here. Often much more is asked from the group with much less power in order for them to allay the fears of the group who already have much more power. And how to pay attention to the shifting dynamics of that. Because sometimes I'm in the 10% group, you know, and plenty of times I'm in the 90% group. And trying to find the ways within which, how do I feel like when I'm on the other side of that? How do I feel like when I'm on the other side of that? And recognizing that there's multiple shifting senses of belonging that I have, and thinking, well, sometimes I'm the one who needs to dismantle my power, and other times I'm the one who hopes that other people can dismantle theirs. And what do I expect of myself in those, and how do I navigate it? And not take it personally when somebody says to me, you've got a lot of power here, rather than going, no, I don't, I'm the victim. To go, oh yeah, I do. That doesn't mean that I have nothing to say or that I should be ashamed of myself. It just means, pay attention to my power. And so I think these kinds of belongings and capacities for curiosity and care that we have, it's possible. And the question is what's it like to have structures of leadership where leaders are saying, let's expand the circle, where we practice those kinds of radical forms of community engagement, challenge, disagreement, argument without recourse to threat and violence. Well, I think America is perfectly capable of that because people are already doing it. I think already in any group of people you could say, what arguments are you working with in your community? And you could come up with, you'd see the harvest of such practiced wisdom in every community already.
Kind of reminds me of, I grew up among the Mennonites, and there's like kind of and I feel it sometimes when I say like, well, I'm a pacifist, we're people who want to practice peace, but really there's such a hilarious, deep coercion of just deciding that the fight is going to be verbal. And sometimes it just means that nobody gets to take a bathroom break. We're staying here until we're having this horrible discussion. But it's kind of, it's not very glamorous, like in practice.
No, it's not. Peace is tiring, bureaucratic, exhausting.
Yeah,
and it takes a lot of time to work through the things to get to the final piece where you're like, look at that. Yeah. But it's an interesting employment of time. Elizabeth Alexander had that great inaugural poem at one of Obama's inaugurations. I always forget which one. Richard Blanco was one of the inaugural poets. Elizabeth Alexander was another. And she said, are we not of interest to one another?
Oh, that's lovely.
And it's a reminder and a call and it's a declaration.
Yeah.
And it's also something of an imperative. Are we not? Like she's putting it there as well as, I think, hoping for it to be true. It's a very, very powerful phrase.
How interesting can we find each? I really like that.
Yeah.
Because it is such a great interpersonal, I don't know, it's one of the sort of like back pocket tricks that I have when I'm really mad at somebody. Is I try to find one thing that I remember being very hyper specifically into.
Yeah.
You know, with like
anyone.
How can I drill down to the thing?
Yeah. I mean, like I have these fantasy games whenever I'm on a bus, which is regularly, just think, if this bus broke down and we all had to be stuck here for an hour, what question could we ask each other that would just make the hour pass quickly? You know, obviously people would get on their phones and write complaint letters and all of that, and fine, do what you need to do. But wouldn't it be interesting to say, let's have a group question? Yeah. You know,
you're very good at group questions.
I love them.
What kind of questions would you ask people?
What's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to you?
Oh.
When do you feel most alive? If right now you were to tell the story of your life, what would the first sentence be?
You've really known insider and outsiderness in all kinds of ways. Catholic and charismatic, being gay in a overwhelmingly straight, very often wounding church culture. Yeah. Understanding the colonial dynamics of the world that you grow up in. Do you think sometimes for people who feel they're I don't know if like loneliness is the right word, but like belonging is such a through line in your work and your desire for people to find those points of connection. I kind of wondered, actually, can I make you read something that I really love? I wondered if you could read your...
Oh, this one. Oh, gosh. It's quite a while since I read this one.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm very interested in form. I'm always interested in form. Formalism in poetry and formalism in language. But I was interested in these questions of, like, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And then I was also interested when people would say something like, say, something terrible had happened in Ireland. So some horrific act of hatred or something. And people would say, not in our name. And I like the sentiment of that. But I also think sometimes when you say that, you go, well, no, it has happened. I hear you want to distance yourself from it. But sometimes saying that something isn't in your name is actually a denial of the fact that it has happened in your name, whether you like it or not. I'm fascinated by belonging. I'm drawn to it, but also repelled by it, because we can do terrible things in the name of belonging. And almost every person I've met who's been recruited into a paramilitary group has been recruited in because of a sense of a promise of belonging. And some of the practices of belonging in groups of violence are very, very powerful. And you can feel like, I'm with my brothers. And you go, yeah, and what's the cost? Maybe not to you, but certainly to other people. But the cost can be high in many of these ways. So, And that doesn't mean we should abandon belonging. So that was all part of trying to think in this poem about belonging and names. It's called In the Name.
Mm-hmm.
In the name of goodness, of love, and of broken community. In the name of meaning, of feeling, and I hope you don't screw me. In the name of darkness and light and ungraspable twilight. In the name of mealtimes and sharing and caring by firelight. In the name of action, of peace and human redemption. In the name of eating, of drinking and table confession. In the name of sadness, regret and holy obsession. The holy name of anger, the spirit of aggression. In the name of forgive and forget, and I hope I get over this. In the name of Father and Son and unholy spirits. In the name of beauty and broken and beaten up daily. In the name of seeing our creeds and believing in maybe. We gather here, a room full of strangers, and speak of our hopeland and talk of our danger, to make sense of our thinking, to authenticate lives, to humanize feeling, and stop telling lies. In the name of philosophy, of theology, and who gives a damn? In the name of employment and study and finding new families. In the name of our passions, our lovings and indecent obsessions. In the name of prayer, of worship and demon possession. In the name of solitude, quiet and holy reflection. The lost, the lonely, the without direction. The early, the late, and the wholly ineffectual. The straight, the queer, transgender and bisexual. In the name of boot clogs and boob jobs and erectile dysfunction, schizophrenia, hysteria and obsessive compulsion. In the name of Jesus and Mary and the mostly silent Joseph. In the name of speaking to ourselves, saying, this is more than I can cope with. In the name of touch up and breakdown and weeping. In the name of therapy and Prozac and full-hearted breathing. In the name of sadness and madness and years since I've smiled. In the name of the unknown, the alien and the holy in exile. In the name of the named and the unnamed, and the names of the nameless, in the names of the prayers that repeat, I wish that I could change this. In the name of goodness and kindness and intentionality. In the name of harbor and shelter and family.
All right. That's so beautiful. It just, oh, it's so beautiful. Like, what a mess we make of all of this, like, misfired love, you know?
Yeah.
Or hope. And it's so beautiful. How are we supposed to pray given, I mean, I love this prayer because it's got such a deep, I'm trying not to reach for profanity. It's like, which is my first instinct.
I mean, I'm a big fan.
It's such a deep fuck you in this.
Yeah, it does.
Which I love.
Yes.
We want so much to like satisfy our deepest hopes for each other. And yet it's just like, it's just such a mess all the time.
I mean, I think so many of us know the situation where you're in some kind of group and something happens where you can just begin to relax and go, oh, I don't have to be perfect. And there's a strange relief and joy and release and connection with that, where you just begin to say that, or you begin to say something difficult has happened in my life, and then suddenly your friends and strangers might go, oh, I've been through something similar. And that is the hope really in this poem, is to begin to go, like, look at the legion of wildness that we all are in ourself. And what would it be like to have civic liturgies that tell that, not as confession of wrongdoing or sin, but confession of truth, and confession of, look what I've been coping with. Look what I've been surviving. And what a relief that could be. And I think so many of us are hoping for that.
Yeah,
you know,
I agree.
I have friends who go to 12-step groups speak without giving any details. They speak about what it's like to be in a place where there is a radical commitment to authenticity and telling the truth. And how much, you know, Nadia Bolz-Weber says that, you know, sometimes what's happening in the basement of church buildings all across the world is often what it is that's happening in the sanctuary, says is happening, but may not be. And I think that's so powerful.
I love blessings because I love the allness of it. My best prayer is usually like, God, let me see the world as it really is. Then I'm not inventing anything. And then I hope for courage. And I have to hope for faith. And I have to hope for other people because I'm definitely not going to be able to largely paper over what's happening. How do you encourage people to pray?
Well, I think a lot about this. I grew up so religious and was involved in Catholic charismatic renewal and then the ecumenical charismatic experience in Ireland, which was very brave and very powerful. It's true to say that by and large, most of those are places of terrible homophobia. So I learned a huge amount about mediation and courage and bravery from people from whom I then later on was put through exorcisms and forced into reparative therapy for being gay. And so...
how old were you in this?
18, the first exorcism, yeah. Oh. So I don't want to define people by only that, because they weren't only that.
Yeah.
There were also people who were doing extraordinary things, and those things coexisted in as much as all kinds of complicated things coexist in me as well. And so one of the things that's been important for me when it comes to the question of God has been to recognize that for me, the word belief is the least interesting question. I'm not that interested if I believe in God. The question is do I experience yearning? Do I experience a need for some way to put my desire into language? And that, I think, is called prayer. That prayer is something that arises from the core of me, sometimes against my other instincts, and links me with something that is guiding and true. And that I think is what so many of us are doing, in and outside of formal affiliations to religion or not. Like the word in English, pray, comes from French prier, to ask. And ask is linked to desire. Yeah. What do you want? What are you asking for? Is it true enough? Is it good enough? Does it lead us? Does it lead us into creativity, or does it lead us into active destruction? And that's what I think is at the heart of prayer. What do you want? I suppose I have a stubborn anthropology that somehow when we correspond to some creative impulse in us, that tends to be a good thing for ourselves and those around us. And that the artist in all of us, and I don't say this as a fool, I say this as somebody who's worked in conflict for a long time, that what we're looking for is ways that we can be working collaboratively in our societies toward the art of healthcare, toward the art of looking after each other, toward the art of structures that allow and facilitate education and learning and encounter and dignity. And I see those things as active prayer.
I like that you started the answer with like sort of violent forms of prayer. I've been exorcised a few times.
Successfully or unsuccessfully?
I am a little too like spiritually agreeable in these situations. But I like that you started by saying like not all prayer is, we shouldn't think of that word as either neutral or necessarily good.
No, it's
but
violent.
It's a kind of,
oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I
had many kinds of asking.
I had a Californian exorcist when I was 18. The week after I was 18, with 20 people in the room, with her hand on my head, screaming at the devil of homosexuality in me, which suddenly I was outed to everybody. And then people were gathered around going, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Like, that's assault, you know? So therefore the question of prayer is not neutral at all.
I don't think I've ever had anyone answer me like that. And I really, given what I normally like study and participate in, I find that so helpful to think about it as like the force of it and the asking of it. And then people can ask and impose themselves on you in so many kinds of ways.
Yeah.
And some of them are so painful. Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking of kinds of prayers for me that are around my cancer that assumed my unfaithfulness or assumed my like complicity in things that hurt me
and causation and blame, or these addictive imaginations that can sometimes happen in the context of a religious affiliation. And so therefore there can be this absolute ravenous desire to somehow locate causation and blame in you. If you can manage that, will save the other person from their limited imagination. And that is a terrible imposition. Yes. And that's a violent prayer when that's put on you.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I love you just said Addictive imagination. I'm going to remember that. That's so beautiful. I always think of it like hypercausal. That's always the language I use, where it just can't help moving to the next domino in their minds to make a synthetic world.
Yeah. And it isn't only, I mean, I think it's really important to say it isn't only people who have a very particular religious affiliation who have that hypercausality.
Oh yeah, welcome to the wellness industry.
Exactly. I'm trained in group work, and so much about what's happening in group work is to help a group to not try to fixate on why did this happen and why was I like that in the group. Say, no, well, you were an asshole in the group. Talk about what's just happened. Talk about what's right here.
I see.
And you talked about prayer as this capacity for presence and to notice.
Yeah.
And it is so difficult to do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can use psychological excuses to go way out of the room instead of going, let me talk about what I just experienced right here, right now.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go, well, here's what happened to me, and terrible things have happened to us, and they are present and they are true. And at the same time, there's an invitation to say, how can I be right here now and say something courageous and true and challenging or vulnerable or whatever is appropriate in the present moment. That's so interesting.
That's a very unpopular view of being present, because mostly when people say be present, especially, I think they often think of it as a solution to the problem of pain. Like, just be here now, relax into the meditative present. And I think, man, being here now is kind of the hardest and sometimes the worst thing.
Yeah.
When I'm miserable or scared or unable to manage my reality, frankly, the last thing I want to do is be fully present in my reality.
Totally. Yeah, and some of those self-soothing techniques are ways of self-censoring and ways of not feeling.
Yeah.
And ways of not feeling the feeling. To go, okay, I'm just feeling this, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling this, it'll pass. And those are very, very helpful, of course.
I really like that.
But they're very helpful. And it can be helpful to go, well, let me just feel it just for a minute. Let me take off the pressure to consolidate or to explain or to blame or to try to contain this just for a minute. Yeah. And then to go, okay, I've been here before and it will pass. And so like I need the reminder that this will pass. So that's necessary. But I also know that there can be other pieces of information that occur if I'm able to sit in the moment.
There can be other pieces of information. You're totally right. Because then you can be interrupted by reality.
Yeah. Remember, I've had a difficult few years, and at one point I was crying, and I was crying by myself, and I noticed I kept on covering my face, and nobody was around for miles. I was completely alone in the countryside. And I found myself thinking, why am I covering my face? From whom? What is this? What's occurring? What is it about me that needs that claustral experience? I don't know if other people need it. And I also don't know the answer to that, but it was just the noticing of it.
I think that's partly, I'm sure other people do this too, but I find when I'm not able to notice myself, noticing my son is so helpful. I came home yesterday and he had made a snuggle box. It's the desire to be small and held every time a package comes and thing comes out of it, and then blankets and pillows are in there. And then all of a sudden, and I look at him and I think, oh man, of course I would love to be held. Yeah, what a great thought. What a great thing. You're just doing this in front of me.
Yeah. What intelligence.
That's right. There's just so many ways to use spirituality to skip what's really happening or to foreclose new possibilities.
Yeah.
It's really funny. We do this Lenten practice together with Everything Happens, and we have this, Lent is the practice of death, right? As we all get together and face down our mortality and but then he rises again, and it's very annoying at the end because you have to go from being in a one way almost totally certain of what's going to happen, which is that we all die and you want to confront your limitations but then he rises from the dead, and I find there's such a lurch trying to let yourself actually be surprised by the fact that life continues to unfold in front of you and that God continues to be actually discoverable. It's sort of a bit of a mind bender every time.
Yeah. two things come to mind, one of which is that a number of years ago, a good few years ago, there was a BBC adaptation of the story of the Gospels after the torture and execution of Jesus by the Romans, and he's buried. The disciples are there, and you're watching it thinking, I know what's happening, he's going to pop up somewhere, and he doesn't turn up. And then this other character, totally different actor, you go, you're the resurrection. And it was so clever because everybody watching it was like, where's Jesus? And suddenly you had to go, oh, I don't recognize resurrection.
Who's this guy?
Who's this guy?
That's so great.
It was so clever. I think of Michael Claber-Diggs, a brilliant poet in Minneapolis, who's got this great poem called Gloria Mundi. And it's about the body turning to life and new forms of life through mushrooms and decomposition. And it is speaking in a very physical, earthly, meaty, mineral and vitamin and way about turning to humus and being part of what might grow, somewhere where a tree might grow from you, and that's resurrection. And I mean that is much more where I go to when I think of questions to do with resurrection. I think it's a lifelong global theme about what happens with life. And what I love about Michael Claber-Diggs' intuition is to say, well, it'll probably be unrecognizable to what I think life is now. And I love the physicality of where his imagination goes. We made a Poetry Unbound episode about it.
That's beautiful. You had this, used to work with kids.
Yeah.
As they, in their kind of spiritual experiences at this, I think it was a retreat center.
Yeah, it was a Catholic it was a school chaplaincy center where schools would send their kids for a day of retreat, 30 of them at a time.
Speaking of the texture and how much more sometimes we get out of our faith or out of our understanding of things that seem so wildly abstract, like God, is the more specific you get.
Yeah.
Sometimes, even if it's just like a wonderful turn of your imagination, the more you can be really surprised by how both fun and funny and moving it is to listen to kids imagine Jesus.
Yeah. I'd done the spiritual exercises in daily life of St. Ignatius when I was in my early 20s. And Ignatius always encourages people to read a text, to read it twice and then close it, and then to put yourself into the text as you're retaining parts of it, and to employ the imagination. So when I got a job as a school chaplain a number of years later, I was interested to think, what would that be like with kids? So, and these were not kind of angels. These were kind of fun, enjoyable, energetic, kind of bonkers West Belfast kids. I loved them. They were great fun. And sometimes it would be a group of 11-year-olds, sometimes a group of 18-year-olds. They were all Catholic by, I don't know what that meant to them, but they were all Catholic by affiliation. To go, we're going to take this imagination walk and go along with it. It's not going to be long. And if you're bored, that's absolutely fine. You don't have to answer any of my questions afterwards. Just be bored quietly, because somebody in the room might be having an experience, and be respectful of their imagination. And then they'd take a walk, and Jesus would come, and he'd know their name. I'd know the name of everyone in the room, and I'd say their name. And then often it followed loosely along some kind of gospel text, maybe like the woman at the well or something like that. And he'd ask them a question, and they could ask him any question back. And I'd say that Jesus is asking, is there any change that you're looking forward to and any change you're worried about? It was just a way of creating an imaginary container for having some kind of conversation that could be something that, if they were ever distressed, to say, you can return to this anytime you want. Tonight, in 10 years, it doesn't matter. You can always come back to this kind of experience. And then I'd ask, did anything happen? And to say, you can say, I'll keep it to myself if you want me to shut up. But one time Jesus had said to this kid, are you looking forward to anything about secondary school? And I said, what did you say? And he went, armpit hair. He was just looking forward to developing some armpit hair, which I just thought, what a fantastic thing. One time I said, what was it like when Jesus said hello to you? And a girl said, do you know when you get home from school and it's been wet and you go inside and the heating is on and you can just sit in an armchair and the fire's lit like that? I thought, are there more beautiful words of praise being uttered in the world right now than that? Utterly unpretentious, this beautiful simile being spoken from somebody who was speaking about bodily experiences, you know. Another time, one of the kids said, when Jesus came up and said hello to me and said my name, the kid said, I said to him, how do I know you are who you say you are? And I said, what did he say? And she said, he looked at me and he told me the story of my life. I was like, right, that's kind of special. And she went, yeah. What? You've had a mystical experience that other people have kind of trained their whole life for. And I said, I knew that this kid would be coming back to the chaplaincy a bit later. And I said, you might find that a nice thing to just remember every now and then. So 6 weeks later, when I saw the kid again, I was like, remember the thing that happened? She went, yeah, story of my life. The whole point of this retreat center was never to try to deepen a child's experience or a young person's experience of faith. It was to say, let's have a positive experience of talking about whatever they want in the place of religion, a positive experience of knowing each other, and that I remembered their name when they were there. That was the whole thing.
Those are very basic
Very.
things.
But you can provide that.
I always liked it in, we always had to take these systematic theology classes or else you couldn't pass your down divinity degree. But they always talked about the grammar, like what are all the basics that you have to learn this language so that you can speak faith. It really felt like there's like a grammar to it. There's this really basic way that we can put together knowing each other.
Yeah.
We learn each other's names. We create the possibility of discovery with each other. We get very curious.
Yeah.
We assume that these things actually can make more than what it looks like they can make.
Yeah.
By itself.
Totally. And I think in psychology and conflict studies, and in many places, there's this thing, the Jalahari window. Do you know that? It's like 4 boxes, like a rectangle split into 4 boxes. And one of them is like things that I know about myself and other people know about me, or things that I see about myself. Another one is things that others see about me that I don't. Another one is things that I see about me that others don't. And then there's that final one, things that none of us know. And whenever I work with a group, it has been fruitful to deliberately say, I don't know why people are here. And I don't know if there's anything that holds us together apart from the physical reality that we're here. And I have found that to nurture that unknown space in group work has been fruitful because it stops me from saying, well, we're all here because. And I'm not a member of faith spaces, but I would imagine that it can be useful to say the same thing in faith spaces. I think there's a way, if in group experiences where you have to consolidate your group's identity in order to know who to hate, that is going to feel very, very welcoming because, hey, I'm in. Mm-hmm. But it is also threatening because it also says, don't leave. And here's how we'll talk about you if you do. And I am interested in thinking, what if we just said, well, we're here. And it's okay if you're not. It's okay if you don't come back. We're not going to talk about you as they used to come to us. Whatever the ways of being with each other, if we can find a way to allow the anarchy of human motivation to be present in a way that might allow the imagination to flourish and for curiosity to occur and for very, very little projection onto the other to say, oh, we're here because we believe the same thing. Mm-hmm. We probably don't.
Mm-hmm. Seems like a much gentler place to start when you're really scared that division is going to take us all apart. Yeah.
Division's everywhere. I'm divided. Division is absolutely everywhere. The question is what we do with it.
Yeah. That's perfect. Yeah. That's a perfect thing to say. Padraig, thank you so much for doing this with me. I really always wanted to be your friend. So
well, we're friends now.
This was me just luring you here on false pretenses. We're actually never going to air this episode. Actually, nobody's taping this.
Okay.
So I've hired her. She's a stranger. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Kate, for having me. It's a lovely thing to be with you.